Start. Okay, welcome everyone to week 2 of our UAA online conference. Today's presentation is the first 5 minutes connecting with students quickly, and this will be presented by Rachel Terry from UVU, Emily Emmerich, and Becca Wiedner from BYU. Just be sure that to remember that the links for week 3 will be emailed to you next week. Okay, over to you, Rachel.
Thank you, Kim. Welcome everyone to the first 5 minutes connecting with students quickly. The idea for this presentation came from a student appointment a couple of years ago pre-pandemic. She came in for the graduation application. I hadn't ever met with her before. To be honest, I don't remember a lot about the appointment besides approving her for graduation. I do remember we shared a few laughs and I answered her questions. But as she went to leave, her hand was on the doorknob. She stopped and slowly turned around and said, "You know, I was really worried this appointment would either be really boring or really stressful, and it was neither." From that moment on, I considered more deeply how important those first interactions really are. I'm Emily Emmerich. I'm an advisor at BYU. Last month, I love sharks, and last month I fulfilled my lifelong dream of swimming with sharks without a cage.
Hi, I'm Rachel Terry. I am an academic counselor at UVU in our first year advising center. A fun fact about me is I once won a lip sync battle with my sister singing Titanium, and we won a very small trophy and it was delightful.
And I'm Becca Wiedner, also an academic advisor at Brigham Young University, and I'm obsessed with the Jonas Brothers. I'm not an OG fan, I'm a newer fan, but pre-pandemic, I was able to go to a concert on their most recent tour, and I didn't have anyone to go with, so I went by myself, but you better believe that I was on the floor in the 4th row, screaming my head off with all the other fans.
Okay, here's a brief preview of what we hope to cover today. We'll put a link for the handout in the chat. It very well may be that some of the things we discussed today may already be in your natural practice. You may even already be an expert in this area. Our goal is to collaboratively share our best tips and tricks to help develop rapport quickly. Combining our more than 15 years of experiences and practices grounded in theory, we hope that you're reminded of things, that you learn something, and that you're engaged. We also hope that you'll better understand why the first 5 minutes matter so much. Our objective is that you will at least find one takeaway to help you develop connections in appointments with students.
Awesome. Okay, so we want to talk a little bit about why this is important. So why is developing connections and first impressions so important? As we remember that students are often intimidated with their first experience with advisors, one of our first tasks as an advisor must be to put the student at ease. We hope that throughout this presentation, you'll find something new to try or an area of growth in developing rapport so you can put your students at ease. We believe that circles back to one of NACADA's core competencies, the relational component, where we create rapport and we build academic advising relationships. Research tells us that rapport motivates students to engage in pro-academic behaviors. So we are literally helping people be better students by developing rapport. And I think that's so powerful. Developing rapport through appropriate self-disclosure and a comfortable office environment can alleviate the student's initial anxiety. It's important to remember that if a student's only experience with an advisor is from high school, They may associate a visit with an advisor with either being in trouble or completing paperwork. And so they might not be sure of what to expect. By breaking the ice and showing a personal interest in our students, we can show warmth and acceptance. And speaking of a personal interest in our students, here's some data from UVU's First Year Advising Center. I want to point out first that I purposely skewed this graph. So if you look at the bottom, it's not starting at 0, and I totally acknowledge that. Some background here is our center emails out a student survey within a few days after a student meets with an advisor in person, through video chat, or over the phone. In part of the survey, students are asked to rate how much they agree to a statement, such as, "My advisor listened to me," or "My advisor gave me accurate information," and "My advisor showed a personal interest in me." We grouped together the student ratings of agree and strongly agree to those questions. And the First Year Advising Center's overall results are all above 90%, which is excellent. We also see some room for improvement, with students rating "My advisor showed a personal interest in me" lower than any other category. I feel like this is a great example of why developing rapport is so important. When we take those first few minutes at the beginning to show a personal interest and get to know our students, we increase the likelihood that they'll return. When we want students to confidently know that their advisor is personally interested in them. There are many great ways to do this, and so Becca will review some of those ways next.
While we want to spend the majority of our time discussing how to build rapport, we think it's important to base our conversation in theory. There's a lot of great advising approaches, and all of them include aspects of rapport building. But for our presentation today, we'll be focused on appreciative advising. And before we get into actually the appreciative advising approach, I want to quickly cover the 6 components of an appreciative advising mindset. To be an effective appreciative advisor, we must first develop this mindset and accept the components of this mindset. So the first component of the mindset is caring enough about each student to be willing to spend time and attention helping the student achieve their potential. The second component is having an attitude of gratefulness for the position we're in as advisors. We have the chance to impact others and support them in their dreams and goals, and I really think that's an incredible opportunity that we get as advisors. Third, we should recognize that no matter how long we've been advising or how good we are at advising, there's always room for improvement. As Emily mentioned, we're hoping that everyone can leave today with even just one small change that they can make in their advising practice to help them be a little bit better. The fourth component is to remember the power we carry with students, as advisors are often perceived, whether correct or not, as being the expert. The fifth component is being interested in your students, having a true curiosity and genuine desire to learn from them. And finally, the sixth component is to be culturally aware and responsive when working with students. This means being aware of your own cultural identity and being sensitive to others. These components are the building blocks of developing rapport, embodying the mindset to help prepares us to build strong rapport with students. But let's talk about appreciative advising now specifically. It's a narrative-based approach, which means learning each student's story is imperative to helping them succeed. In fact, 2 of the basic assumptions of appreciative advising are, first, that every college student has the potential for academic success, and second, that every college student possesses unique strengths. With that philosophy undergirding all that we do as advisors, it only seems natural that we would want and need to develop rapport with our students. In appreciative advising, the advisor moves through 6 phases with the student, working together to unlock the student's full potential. The first phase, or the disarm phase, is the initial creation of a safe, welcoming environment for students. This is where our presentation is focused on the first 5 minutes. While developing rapport continues in the second phase of appreciative advising, or the discover phase, we want to spend more time thinking about the very beginning. Some of the key features of the disarm phase include giving students a warm welcome, keeping your office clean and comfortable, appropriately disclosing information about yourself, and presenting open nonverbal behavior. But we'll be getting into more of these features and our tips for developing rapport later in the presentation. One aspect of becoming a strong appreciative advisor is using self-reflection as a tool to learn more about ourselves and how we operate, thereby becoming better advisors. We also believe that reflection can lead to more impactful and intentional changes for advisors. So with that, we do have something we'd like you guys to do and hopefully respond in the chat about. So spend the next couple of minutes thinking about these questions. How do you build rapport with students? Are your rapport building techniques successful? What are the problems you've encountered? And finally, what tips do you have for building rapport? Go ahead and share your thoughts in the chat because we'd love to hear from you. Later in the presentation, we're going to be covering our best tips for developing rapport, some of which come from problems we've encountered or things that have been successful. And as we started our research, we quickly discovered that there's a wealth of information on rapport building and how to develop rapport, but we want to learn more from all of you as well. And maybe you haven't had problems yet, or maybe you don't feel particularly successful yet, but either way, we think that we can learn more from each other. So we'll give a few minutes for everyone to think about that. And maybe be thinking about if you've had a particular advising session that's haunted you for better or for worse. Maybe there's something you did that was really great, or maybe something didn't go well. I'll be honest, a lot of our thoughts for this presentation came from thinking about these questions, but also thinking about those advising sessions that maybe weren't so great.
Maybe mention that it's the Q&A and not the chat. If that helps.
So yeah, for this type of Teams event, you want to use the Q&A to respond. We'll just give a few seconds because I know sometimes this is something that you want to spend a little bit of time thinking about and reflecting on. Okay, so we have some things coming in. How can an advisor break the ice with a student who is socially awkward? Totally can relate to that, or a student who maybe doesn't talk very much. And we'll be talking about that later in the presentation. Someone else shared, one thing I've made a habit of asking is what their career goals are. This helps me help them more effectively. Most times this is very successful. So kind of asking about their long-term goals. What are they wanting to do beyond the time that they're at your institution? Let's see. Also, some problems I've encountered is that students are not interested in building rapport or relationship, and they want to get to the point and just want answers to their questions. They want that prescriptive information. That's one that we identify with as well, and we definitely address that later in the presentation. Here's another challenge, struggling with small talk. My mind goes blank and awkward pauses abound. Yeah. Hopefully today we'll answer some of those for you, and then we encourage you to keep thinking about your practice and think changes that you can make to build that connection quickly in the first 5 minutes. And thanks so much for being willing to share as well.
There's a few more. Do you want to do them or move on?
Go ahead and move to the next one. Okay, so our focus, of course, like I said, is on building rapport, and it's based in appreciative advising. But we also wanted to mention the NACADA core values because they support these same ideas. Advisors that choose to embrace these values are embracing the need to develop rapport with students. The values of caring, empowerment, inclusivity, professionalism, and respect can all be related to building rapport. Rapport is mostly built within those initial one-on-one interactions with students, but we think there's some pieces to consider before your students even walk in the door. One study published in a NACADA journal found that while advisors may choose to use a variety of approaches, students were actually most concerned about the warmth and support they felt from their advisor. This doesn't mean advising approaches aren't important, it's just equally important to think about the human connection. The same study found that non-white students receive significantly less amounts of developmental advising as compared to white students. Advisors have a crucial impact on students, and in order to have a positive impact on all students, we should consider accessibility and diversity. What does your office and advisement center represent? Think about the layout, the signs on the walls, the available physical resources to students. Are they accessible to all? Do they represent and serve all students? And additionally, look for training opportunities for yourself and your office to increase your awareness.
Check your office space from the student's perspective. Walk in, sit down where a student would sit. What is their vantage point? See it from their viewpoint. Be thoughtful and considerate about your personal items on display. Make your office a safe place for all who come in.
And what does your schedule communicate to students? Are they able to easily schedule an appointment? Can they reach you through email? Availability and responsiveness can impact rapport before we've even met with a student. One study found that reply promptness and helpfulness in email predicted later student ratings of trust, equality, closeness, and satisfaction. While we may not have complete control of our availability, we can show we're accessible through our responsiveness. Try and respond to emails within 48 hours, even if it's just to acknowledge the email.
Reliability and consistency. We can demonstrate consistency in our responses to emails and in our appointments. Consistency leads to a reputation of being reliable. It can be helpful to establish routines such as a monthly communication or a newsletter for some advising centers.
Not only must we be prepared with what we need to know about our institution, which is informational and conceptual components of the NACADA core competencies, but to be well prepared before meeting with each student. If time allows, we've found that it's helpful to take notes about each student, to recall background information or personal information, or to follow up and ask about it in later appointments. This will help the student feel heard and seen.
I firmly believe that our jobs are not apolitical. So what's going on in the United States or other countries can greatly impact our students. Policy shifts from institutions, such as the changes last summer about international students with student visas, and current events such as Black Lives Matter protests or the COVID-19 pandemic are all things as advisors that we need to know about. And so with that, we are going to, now that we've laid that groundwork and the foundation for why, we'd like to share our tips for building rapport. But these just aren't any tips. They are our best tips. And we would love to hear from you in the chat if you feel a connection to any of these, or if you have ones of your own.
Okay, whether it's an in-person appointment, Zoom, or phone, people hear and feel a smile. Dr. Schramm addressed this in his keynote last week as an important happiness hack. The 2019 Journal of Experimental Psychology study and a 2017 emotion study found that just the simple act of smiling improves physical and mental health. It increases immunity, it reduces stress, and isn't that what we're all interested in improving? It's fascinating that something so small can have such a profound influence. When we're smiling and engaging with other people, it's the engagement with the other people that makes us feel better. A nod or a wave can also create connection, but it's harder to engage in friendly gestures without a smile spontaneously. If you're smiling, your body language will match your smile more closely. Even with a mask, smile behind your mask as you wave hello. We are all familiar with mask smiles. It's in the eyes. A smile can speak volumes. This is especially relevant for people with autism. Masks may create a significant barrier to reading other people's expressions, or for people with hearing impairments who rely on lip or facial reading.
Consider your body language. People approach what they like and avoid what they don't like. So how can we use our nonverbal behaviors or body language to enhance our rapport with students or bring us closer? In studying instructional immediacy, or how to bring instructors and students closer together, there are several nonverbal actions you can take to build your relationship with the student. Some of these actions include using nonverbal mirroring, which is literally copying the student's body language. In fact, I find that I instinctively do this when I'm talking with people, where I start doing the same gestures or standing the same way that they're standing. We can also gesture at the same speed or the same amount as the student, and lean in when listening to show engagement. I don't know if you've ever seen anyone who's really interested in a conversation, or two people talking about something that they really enjoy. They tend to get a little bit closer, and it can get really intense watching them lean into each other. And I find that I do the same thing, and it's a great way to show the student that you're engaged and you want to hear what they have to say. Try and keep an open body stance by uncrossing your arms and legs. Nod to show understanding, and like Emily said, of course, smile. And last, make appropriate eye contact. These actions can enhance the relationship and communicate interest in the student.
One of the key components of actively listening and intentionally interviewing is letting the student talk. Weird, right? This is a skill that I feel takes practice and a concerted effort. I know it did for me. And then as I intentionally used minimal verbal encouragers such as yes, and nonverbal encouragers such as nodding my head, open body language like Becca just mentioned, it became a more natural part of my practice. The literature calls these tricks attending behaviors. The key here is that when we're actively listening, we're seeking to understand and hear the student, and we're not trying to figure out how we want to respond. Listening with the intention to respond leads to interruptions, while listening with the intent of hearing and understanding the student leads to the student providing more information and saying what they need to say. When we interrupt students, or anyone really, we're signaling that what we have to say is more important than what they have to say, and that's an awful feeling. I invite you to practice this one just a little bit. Let the student talk for as long as they want, and only after there's been an obvious space to respond, then think of your response. I know for me, depending on the day, it can take a lot of effort to be present and mindful and not be thinking of other things. So definitely give yourself some grace while you practice. I remember one time I was meeting with a student on academic probation and asking a question that required a little reflection on his part. What would you consider to be your strengths? After about a minute or so, he said he wasn't sure. So I offered a few other prompts based on what I knew about him. I said, what would your partner say is a strength of yours? What's something you were really good at growing up as a kid? And after that, we sat for a few minutes. I think he thought if he didn't answer that I would just move on, but he was incorrect. Eventually, he shared a few things and we got to talking about how he could use those strengths regarding his academic probation. We met again a few months later, and this time when I asked an open-ended question, he was much quicker to respond. A new advisor was observing the appointment and he told her about how he learned that I wasn't going to let him off the hook. And so I share this story as an example that not interrupting doesn't always mean cutting in while a student's talking. It can also mean interrupting when a student is thinking or formulating a response or figuring out how they want to say it. We show our students that we value their ideas, thoughts, and words when we give them the time and space to share those things.
Okay, research by Dr. Carol Dweck and her work on growth mindset has proven that encouragement is better than praise. Praise can create approval junkies instead of people with enhanced self-esteem. Praise verbally rewards the person, and back to the Nakata core values, encouragement empowers a person. Encouragement recognizes ownership and responsibility for the effort, while encouragement instills self-confidence and self-reliance. By very definition, encouragement is empowering. So if possible, encourage more than you praise. Use more "you've got this" and "you can do it" and less "good jobs." Sometimes we all just need someone to believe in us. When I first started in this role, I found that I had a need for a tangible encourager. I had this very card printed up in business-sized cards, and I passed them out only when it seemed most needed. One day, I had a former non-traditional returning student who had recently gone through a divorce. She moved her and her 2 kids from California, started back in school after 15 years of being gone. She expressed a lot of fear in starting over again and in her ability to finish. So I gave her a card and she seemed grateful, but ended up changing her major, so I didn't see her again. When she graduated, she wrote me an email. 3 years had passed. She told me that she carried that card in her wallet all 3 years as she completed her undergraduate degree, and she took it out whenever she needed a reminder. She said that she looked at it every time she was stressed or felt overwhelmed, every time she had a big test or a big paper due. She said that it was a reminder that someone believed in her. Not long after graduation, she met a woman who was in her similar shoes 3 years ago. She gave this woman her well-used card, and the encouragement echoed well beyond that 30-minute appointment years ago.
I love that story so much, Emily.
And
what I love about it is it's not just one person. It's, you know, it's almost like generational. Like you made a difference in multiple people's lives. Okay, my next one has a very grumpy looking person on it. Admit when you don't know the answer is our next tip. And so when it comes to this, I relate this back to one of Nakata's core values, integrity. Owning up to the straight up fact that we don't and can't know everything is being honest with yourself and your students. However, I don't think this means that you leave students in the dark. This is where strong referrals come in. Sometimes that means being with the student as you follow through, and sometimes it means giving the information. So we'd like to ask you about what you do here. So tell us what you do. What do you do when you don't know the answer to a student's question or don't know how to respond when they're sharing something? And also, what are some different ways to make referrals that work for you and your students? So if you could hop over into the question and answer and put your responses there, we'd love to see those. Some real life examples from my position are, I don't know everything about financial aid, and I can refer you to a financial aid counselor who can answer your questions. So usually that includes showing them the financial aid website or helping them set up an appointment. Pre-COVID, it would occasionally mean walking the student down to the financial aid office to meet with one of the financial aid counselors. Or I don't know enough about a specific program to answer that question, and I can refer you to a departmental advisor who can. Sometimes I'll give the student an email address to connect with, and other times I'll copy the student on an email to the advisor that they want to contact. A big one is I'm not a therapist or counselor, and so I can refer you to mental health resources local to our community and accessible to you, or in pretty serious situations, I can walk with you to our on-call crisis counselor. So yeah, we'd love to hear what you do. I'm seeing you tell them that you don't know, but you'll find out and back to you ASAP. I think that's great. Definitely owning up to it, but letting them know you're going to follow through is a great way to follow up with that. Oh, here we go. Okay. Megan Sim and Tana Allen say that when they respond with, let me reach out to the experts and I'll get back to you by, and then giving themselves a deadline, which I think is also great for accountability, because then the student can know, oh, if I didn't hear from them by then, that's when I should follow up. So that's awesome. I love that. And meeting online and Googling things. I love to do that because a lot of the questions I get sometimes are very easily Googleable. And so those online video chats are really helpful. Awesome. Some similar ones of giving contact. I'm reminding your students that you are also human and learning too. Yes, awesome. Being honest about what you do and you don't know and saying you'll follow up after research. Someone mentioned a soft handoff, so including the referral contact in the email and then saying that makes it a smooth wraparound. Wonderful. A small handout with helpful information for lots of used resources. And then this is a great comment about boundaries, making sure that we're not advising about things that we don't know about and letting them know that's not something I know about and connecting them to someone who can help you. And looking up answers with the student. Yeah, these are all awesome. Thank you so much for your engagement there. One thing I like to say is I cannot have all that information in my brain. So let's look it up together and we can learn together.
Okay, I think that authentic relationships are developed through curiosity. So be curious with your students. I had an amazing student a couple years ago who came in for a required advising appointment. And before we got down to business, I just asked a simple question about some pins she had in her backpack. And that just very basic question was the start to a great friendship. As a student, we ended up meeting several times, and every time I looked forward to her appointments, and she later shared that she did as well. Our friendship continued to develop over a couple years, but I'm not sure that we would have connected the same way except for those first few minutes of genuine curiosity where we bonded over some shared interests. When she graduated, she asked me to stay in touch with her and sent me a sweet letter talking about how much she would miss our meetings, and I can say that I felt the same. So what does it mean to be curious? Here are some ideas we have to help you as you express curiosity to students. First of all, be open-minded. We all have different experiences and backgrounds that led us to where we are today. Be willing to hear and learn from someone who's had a different experience than you. And if we're approachable, students will feel more comfortable coming to us for assistance. Ask open-ended questions so you can move the conversation forward and give the student a chance to express themselves. As Rachel mentioned in her tip about not interrupting, practice saying less. We don't need to fill all the time, and the appointment isn't for us, it's for the student. And as a caution, don't let curiosity drive the purpose of the appointment. While a certain level of curiosity is helpful and can create rapport, it can also go astray if the focus shifts from an advising appointment to an interrogation. We are all connected by a simple wish: to be visible, to be heard, to know that we matter. You never know what you're going to learn from your students or what you're going to learn about them, and I think this is one of the best parts of our job. We have a chance to learn and connect with amazing, inspiring individuals. Next tip, be present. One of the best ways to connect and one of the greatest things we can give students is to be present in the moment with them. This means using active listening, as Rachel mentioned earlier. Listen and then reflect so that you can ensure that you're on the same page with the student. Use their name multiple times throughout your meeting to increase your immediacy to them. I'll admit I've had appointments so packed before that when a student walks in the door, I realize I haven't even taken the time to think about what their name is, and so I can't even greet them by name. And I hate that feeling. I don't want them to feel like they're one of just many students, so I really try and make sure that I can start every appointment with the student's name. And if I don't know how to say their name, I just ask. Abraham Maslow stated, "The ability to be in the present moment is a major component of mental wellness." This reminds me of what the keynote Dr. Schramm discussed last week. Instead of being preoccupied with the future, like emails we need to answer or meetings that we need to be preparing for, or the past, how the last appointment went, or feedback we've received on the student survey, we need to be present for our students and for ourselves. For me, this means putting my cell phone away during appointments. I also have my email notifications turned off because I don't like them pinging up during appointments. I also like to keep my office space clean and uncluttered so that there aren't any projects out that are distracting to me or the student. And what this means for you could be something different, but I do think being present with the student and letting go of all the other stuff going on around us not only helps us connect, but helps us to enjoy the moment. Allowing yourself that time to connect with another human being can be very fulfilling and energizing.
In a world of constant hustle and bustle, it's so refreshing when you can just sit and be, when you don't have to feel hurried, or worse, when the person you're with is rushed. Beyond being present and helping the student feel that this time is 100% for them, don't rush them. Even in our busiest times, don't rush them. There have been quite a few times, a student will say, I forgot what I was going to ask you. I've started to respond with the phrase, take all the time you need. Usually it's met with a sigh of relief and a thank you. Ultimately, they always come up with the question that they momentarily forgot. No one has ever extended beyond their appointment time when I invited them to take all the time they need. Ultimately, allowing time saves time in the long run.
What about masks? While we hope these tips will help you make a connection to students quickly, we recognize that right now things look a little different. You may not be meeting face-to-face with students, or if you are, likely you're both wearing masks. While all of these tips still apply, there are a couple points we wanted to acknowledge. First of all, you should still smile, except now you're smiling with your eyes. Practice that awesome Tyra Banks smize. Body language will be even more important in a masked environment, so use gestures and mirror your students' actions. When you're speaking, make sure to pause, accentuate, use a loud volume, and show emotion to clearly communicate through the mask. And you can still use active listening to make sure you're understanding what the student is saying. Lastly, there may be times when it's actually better and easier to communicate through Zoom or some other type of video chat.
Okay, if you are going to use video chat, here are some tips to help you. As Becca mentioned, and as we've mentioned before, make sure to smile. Unless it's a connectivity or a bandwidth issue, make sure to have your video on. Mirror the student and monitor their engagement. Make adjustments if needed. Remember that your background is your brand, and even though we cannot make direct eye contact, look into the camera as a way to connect.
All right, building rapport over the phone. I personally find phone appointments to be the most difficult of all of these because there's a lot less cues for a student to pick up on and give to me as an advisor. They can't see my brightly decorated office or sit in my comfy chair. I also can't make a connection based off something they're wearing or ask them if they had trouble finding my office. I don't even get the benefit of seeing their face like I do on most video chats. And I can't use my like awesome rainbow backgrounds as an icebreaker. So it sounds a lot of complaining, but what can we do? You can hear a smile. So smiling is a pretty common theme between in-person, masks, and video chats and phones. But I think it's true that you can hear whether someone is excited to talk to you and hear you. Be engaged and body posture attentive. So even though they can't see you, your interaction with them, you can tell what it's like when your body posture is attentive. Focus on the appointment, don't multitask. I know that's something that I struggle with is I feel like, oh, I can also look at my email while I'm waiting for them to do something or check my phone. But just like you would for an in-person or video chat, try not to do anything else but be present with the student. Let natural pauses happen. This kind of goes back to the not interrupting and active listening, where natural pauses are going to happen and you don't need to fill in the gaps right away. It's okay for some of that to happen and to let the student be the one to pick those up most of the time. Be sure to recap and check for understanding often. Partially so that you know that you're understanding what's going on, and partially so that the student knows that you understand what they're saying. And then finally, don't just get straight to business. Try to ask something about their day or something fun so that it can start off without going right into what they're trying to talk about. All right. So we've reviewed some of the research and talked about some tips for connecting with students quickly. Next, we're going to move into some fun role play advising videos. And we need to congratulate our wonderful actresses, Becca and Emily, for these. They did an awesome job. So something I'd like you to be thinking about as you're watching these videos is we're looking for your feedback. So as you watch these videos, tell us, what do you see in yourself from these videos? And how do you think the students feel? As well as what do you feel like went wrong and what do you feel like went right? So our first video is the distracted advisor.
Oh, hi. Go ahead and have a seat. Let me just, oh man, hold on 1 second. What did I do with that? Yeah, sit down.
I just think they're so funny. And so we'll gather, we'd love to hear your feedback in the chat. Since there's a little bit of delay, I'm gonna look at all of the feedback at the end of watching all of these. Our next one is the cold advisor.
Hi.
Oh, hi.
Should I sit down?
I guess.
And I was trying not to laugh, but I just can't resist. All right, and then the another example, the warm and welcoming advisor. So again, any feedback about how you identify with this or what went wrong or how you think the student feels, we'd love to hear that feedback in the chat.
Hi, Emily. Come on in, have a seat. I'm Becca. I'm your academic advisor. Hi.
Awesome. Okay. So yeah, we'd love to hear what you have to say about some of those videos in there. As far as what we're seeing, there was that first video where Becca was kind of a distracted advisor. And then in the second video, Becca was an example of kind of a cold advisor. And then that last one, she was kind of warm and welcoming. So tell us what you feel. What did you see there? I'll talk about some of the things that I can see. In that distracted advisor clip, her office was pretty cluttered. She wasn't prepared to meet with the student coming into her office, and she seemed even caught off guard a little, as if she wasn't expecting anyone. And I think something to note in that example is there are a lot of good intentions on the advisor's end, but impact matters more than intent in this context. So tell us what you think about that. In the cold advisor one, she didn't greet the student initially, and she left the student guessing about what to do and how the appointment was going to go. I doubt that many of us would consider ourselves cold, hopefully, but I think there are sometimes just off days, but we'd love to hear your thoughts about what could be improved in that kind of a situation. I'll come back and take a look at the chat. So we have some people saying they wouldn't be comfortable around the cold or the distracted advisor and would definitely feel more comfortable with the warm and welcoming advisor. I hope so. And only one of them showed the advisor knowing the student's name. That's right, yeah. And I don't know that, my guess is that they probably do know the student's name in the other cases, but maybe they didn't look at the information before or something like that.
And I think part of the benefit of seeing these is so that we don't fall into those cold and distracted advisor roles.
Yeah, now go. They couldn't hear you before.
Okay, and part of I think the benefit of seeing these is so that we can see and know what we don't want to do.
Nathan says his voice goes up 3 octaves when trying to sound welcoming, and I'd say that's pretty common. I wonder if there's some research behind that. Is there some kind of research that says higher voices mean that we connect more? Someone's talking about how the warm and welcoming advisor reminds them of what their mama taught them. When someone comes to your house, you come to the door quickly, you smile and you invite them in. It's like someone bringing you into their home. And they love how, another person loved how the warm advisor stood up to greet the student. Yeah, and I feel like these are some really great examples of what we can do to be intentional about our interactions. John David says he felt awkward in the first 2 videos. Don't worry, I do too, and that's why I laugh about it. I laugh to try to not feel awkward, wanting to just finish and get out. The frazzled advisor, I see the frazzled advisor when students stop by without an appointment. True, yeah, when you're not expecting someone, you can feel kind of disorganized. And so hopefully this gives you some ideas of how to make a student still feel welcome. Wonderful, thank you for that feedback. If you've got more, you're welcome to keep putting that in the chat here. We just want to remind, one other thing is rapport is established in the first 5 minutes, but it goes beyond the first 5 minutes. Thank you for engaging with us, and we want to come and show you some other role plays as far as maybe some difficult students interactions. And we remember that appreciative advising reminds us that initial interactions are never neutral.
Okay, we have a couple more role plays, but I just got noticed that we only have a couple minutes, so I want to make sure we get to your questions. A couple of people in the question and answer earlier wanted to know about certain situations, so we're just going to jump right in there. In the chat or the question and answer, write down how you would help a student who's in a big hurry. Also, someone who only wants prescriptive information and someone who doesn't want to talk. So put your answers in there. While you're typing, I'll talk to you about some of our tips and tricks and what we would do. For someone who is in a really big hurry, some of our tips that we've suggested today is be curious, ask them good, open-ended questions, because a question can change anything. Also, don't interrupt them, because if they are in a hurry, their main priority is to get in, say what they want to say, and get out. Also, make sure to give them space and be present to make sure that you're fully there and maximizing their times. There will be times that the student only has time to ask their questions and get in and out, so make it so good they want to come back for more. And while we acknowledge that these student situations aren't bad, but they may present more obstacles in building initial rapport. As far as a student who doesn't want to talk, some of our thoughts were to make sure to smile, help them feel warm and welcome right from the get-go. It's the easiest icebreaker there is. And hopefully you've already made your office a safe, open space so they feel comfortable when they walk in. Double check your body language. Are you sitting in a way that indicates that you're ready and willing to talk? Also, make sure to give this student space, like we talked about before. Don't interrupt them. Make sure that they could be collecting their thoughts or their emotions. And then, just for lack of time, I'm going to go right into it, the prescriptive information. We've all had students who come in, maybe they need to know what they need to do to get to graduation and make sure that they're not missing anything. We know that there's a time and a place for this, but there's so much more to advising than prescriptive advising. I personally work with limited enrollment programs, and they're strictly sequenced. Students have to take classes with their cohort on a specific schedule. Some of the requests for prescriptive information are necessary, may indicate that a student is following the plan. However, even in those situations, there's room for developmental advising. My favorite question to ask in those situations is, besides graduating, what's your #1 goal for remaining time at college? And again, going back to the tips, encourage them on their path, and which gives them space to grow. I'm going to check the chat, see what you've said. What would you like to accomplish in this meeting? That's so valuable. Then we get down to what they need to talk about. For the advisor who didn't know how to pronounce their student's name, ask them. Name means so much to us as people. Usually people love to talk about their name or tell about its origin or how to say it correctly. Give a nice warm welcome, introduce yourself. And yes, and it's okay to ask if they can remind you on the name. Okay, I'm sorry we're running out of time, but we want to keep the chat going. We can stay on and answer questions. The great Jane Goodall said, "You cannot get through a single day without having an impact on the world around you. What you do makes a difference, and you have to decide what kind of difference you want to make."
So here's our contact information if you'd like to reach out to any of us with our, not pictures, but our special tidbits about us from the beginning. And then I just want to do a quick shout out that we know that academic advisors are awesome people, and We bet that you know other people that would also make awesome academic advisors who aren't here today. And so the First Year Advising Center is hiring, and we would love for you to share this information with someone who you think would be a good fit for our team. So if you know someone who could benefit from this opportunity, please have them reach out to me or give them this information. We'd love to hear from them. Thank you. And so, yeah, if you have any other questions, you're welcome to stay on and put something in the chat. We'll hang out here for a few more minutes, but thank you so much for being here with today and for engaging with us. It was awesome to hear your ideas and have you share your experiences. And we hope that you went away with at least one new thing to try in your advising practice. Woohoo!
There's so many great things in the chat. I want time to read through everything.
There's so many good things in here.
So many, and I couldn't get to them all. I felt really, really bad, but they said 4 more minutes, and that was